Y'all come on in. A new book that was released at the end of 2022. So I wanted to tell you that I know at least a couple of languages. I know English, a little bit of Spanish, and because I was in the Navy, I know how to cuss. So that's really not an angry language that I use. What we're here to do today is we're going to talk about planting seeds, okay? Because when you plant a seed, things tend to grow. That's what starts. Okay? So, I'd like to frame this for you so everybody understands where we're going. We've got it in 3 parts, and we're going to be timely in this. So we're going to do a long shot. That's the first little section we'll talk about. Now, I'm not going to reveal this book, okay? I'm not going to reveal it to you, but I will let you know that you're getting a preview of something else that's in the works, okay? Does anybody want me to introduce myself?
Speak up. Yes.
Can you speak up? Okay, I apologize. My name's Ron Spencer. I graduated from high school here in 1975, and I've got an award, okay, for anybody who can tell me something about your graduating class, and I'll tell you what that requirement's going to be, all right? Still can't hear me. All right. I can tell you this much. We're going to do long shot first, and then part 2 is coming from where we're from. Things were different here in Patrick County. Okay. And then finally, the last section is where you get a preview of what's in the works, and that's not to steal from yourself. Now, a lot of people say, well, what in the world is he talking about? You're stealing from yourself. We'll talk about that. Okay, I really do believe this should be some reading project, okay, and because it's theoretical, it's educational, it's entertainment, right? As well as there's a lot of comedy, romance, and tragedy in this one book. So it is some of my best work, but I'm an ugly writer. So you've heard of Will Rogers, theorist, comedian. Will Rogers said that people learn in 3 different ways. They either read something, they hear it, or there's some people who just have to, excuse my language, have to pee on the electric fence themselves. Read, observe. Don't do the 3rd option, okay? We don't want that option. Okay, so let's go in here and talk about, anybody want to take a stab at the 2 most important words in the English language? 2 most important words. And they are thank you. I'd like to thank every one of you for coming today. You could have been anywhere else. You chose to come, you took time out of your day, and you invited me here. I'm one of us. Okay, it ain't about me. I'm one of y'all. It's us. Okay? So now is where we get active participation. Can anybody tell me, and I'll start with you, Ricky, who's your favorite teacher?
Sitting right here. Ms. Eastridge.
Well, she's got 2 books over there. Ms. Eastridge,
I'll tell you the time he ripped his shirt off while he was on stage. We were doing an assembly, and that we weren't supposed to go overboard or anything, and the principal was in there and everybody else, and he got up on stage and he got so wild he jerked his shirt off in front of everybody.
Well, you stirred him up.
I didn't stir him up, it was the music.
It was Elvis, wasn't it?
It was Elvis Presley.
Oh, blame it on Elvis.
Hey, Rich, can you tell my brother Richard? Can you tell me who's your best friend in high school?
Actually, my best friend was probably, I didn't have many friends, but it was probably my cousin Albert. We got along. There was a situation one time where we were in Mr. Ridney's class. He was probably my favorite teacher because I laughed at him a lot. But at any rate, we were in class, and we were throwing, and I was one of them, we were throwing spitballs at Mr. Rigney. And Albert Lewis was sitting in front of me, and Mr. Rigney turned around and said, "Who did that?" And I was sitting behind my cousin Lewis, and I said, and Mr. Rigney threw him out of class.
Terry, tell me, where was your favorite hangout?
Bank parking lot.
Yes, sir.
What did you say?
Bank parking lot.
The bank park?
Yes.
You remember?
That was in the day. Yes.
All right, I had to process it. I was listening with a different ear. I got it. The bank parking lot, I got it.
Ride 2 miles a night.
Oh, yeah, you
Ride
had
to
to.
the bank parking lot, just hang out, cool cars.
Anybody like Fairstone?
You know, used to go to Fairstone, over to the lake.
Okay.
Hang out there. Yep.
All right, Jason, you get the last one. All right, tell me, and this is for an award, a reward. Tell me, all right, what was the graduation song the year you graduated?
Imagine.
And well, give me a couple of stanzas, please.
Imagine all the people living for today. 1970, 200th anniversary of the world.
Do you like Chick-fil-A?
Yes, I do. I love it.
The man got it.
1976, the 200th anniversary of our nation. We sung Imagine.
All right, so let's just set some ground rules here. And a lot of people say, well, which came first, chicken or the egg? And one person says, well, the chicken. The other says, no, the egg came. And then finally, the smart aleck says, it was the chicken. And somebody got thrown out of the window. So we're not throwing anybody out of windows today. All we're doing is trying to plant that seed, okay? Okay, so let's just talk about this book here that we got. I don't have it over here, but there are a lot of them over on the table. It's not fabrication, it's not blame, it's not tell-all book, okay? The Genesis, what started this thing off was my daughter who decided at 62, I was too young to retire. Okay, and so, you know, she's a busybody and gave me something to do. And then my sister Karen fell in line with her, and they said, all right, here's some research, see what you can do with it. So it has a lot of mountains and valleys, but the thing is, it's a work that is composed of a lot of people and stories they told to make it a complete picture, okay? And so I will tell you that there's a big old opinion on the cover. You might look at that and say, oh, I can almost tell what that's about, but you cannot judge a book, right? By simply looking at the cover. So what it is about, it's an ugly, beautiful memoir, okay? And it's from a not-so-great writer. I already shared that with you. It's Lips and Families and Friends, the lifestyle of the poor and broke. I could have made that time, because that's what we grew up with. We had a lot of needs. Now, I talk about the Black Plague that was, could have been a victim of the Black Plague. And what that is being poor and broke without any education. That's, you're destined to fail. So there's no dishonesty, no illusions, and I will tell you, it's amusing and creative. There are lessons about courage, friendship, empathy, okay? And there's some low-key issues, very low-key about race and gender. That's not what we're here to talk about, okay? So you see this last section on here. And it talks about, this is an inspirational book, but it also talks about CPR. And in this case, CPR stands for change in your perspective is required. When you're not getting the outcome and you're not seeing what you want to see, you've got to look at something different. And that's what CPR is here, change your perspective. Okay? Keep an open mind, it's descriptive, and it can be used for spiritual growth. And I can tell you that the good Lord, I'm not sure, I'm not trying to decide who's where, but the good Lord wrote himself into this manuscript. This is not all about me, because it's lonely work. Anybody written anything lately?
Mm-hmm.
You written an op-ed?
I'm a reader, not a writer.
This is lonely work.
Around.
And you're sitting there, you're always second guessing yourself as to what this thing really, what picture you're trying to paint here. So keep an open mind, it is descriptive, and in the last sections it can talk to you about how you can really make it with a hat pin if that's all you got. Because it really does give some tangible, concrete evidence as to how you can make it. And you know there's tremendous wealth disparity in America. There's a lot of haves and a lot of have-nots. It's not even the thing that I had difficulty with in Patrick County, when you finish school, there wasn't anything left for you to do. And it was like there wasn't anything for you to do really when you were in school. And so that was the challenge. Now what am I going to do? So I had 4 older brothers who had went in the military, and I guess it was my destiny. I mean, the Navy for me had everything I was looking for. They had 3 meals a day, right? They had a bed, and they paid you some decent money. I mean, you had to risk your life, all right, and do some things to get there. But in my case, in CPR, everything that I was doing was bigger than me. I was seeing pictures that were bigger than anything I'd seen before. So what I'm saying and trying to inspire you to do is don't let anybody put a ceiling on your potential. Right? You can do what you set your mind to if you're determined to do that. So you remember in college, right? You had basic psychology, where you had an id and an ego. You were the ego. Id was over here, the ego in the center, and then you had a super ego. Really good guy, really bad guy. I'm kind of challenging you today to think about an alter or a counter ego, somebody to bounce ideas off of. And in my case, it's my spouse. I can bounce things off her and get feedback. I stop listening to myself and listen to somebody else. Okay. So, it's unfortunate, it really is unfortunate, that people look at us, you, me, everybody, you are successful if you can get yourself as far as possible from the hood, where we grew up. If you can get yourself away, you can be successful. But what I'm saying to you is, all right, you leave people behind. If you can bring it back and educate, inspire those, then you've done your job. Because I have to challenge you and ask you, what is your investment in Patrick County? Right? Do you want this to be just passing fancy? I got mine, you get yours the best way you can. There's not Miss Etheridge around the corner every time you look back. So that has to be something intrinsic. Okay? Any questions so far? We're moving along pretty good. So I really do emphasize, don't let anybody tell you your value unless you do have value. Right? It's just the way, it's not what you say, but the way you say it. And that's what this book talks about, conflict management, the way you say it. But I already told you it's lonely work. So, here we go. So I'll tell you about Patrick County. It's sort of similar to an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. Right? Finish high school, now what are you going to do? You got to do something. Stagnation is not an option. Right? You got to do something different. Be different. You know there's something got to give. It's going to be an impact. And how many of y'all believe we're living in the Bible Belt?
Yeah,
Bible
definitely.
Belt? Yeah. The church on every block, maybe. On
Yep.
every corner. Yeah. I think we are in the belt. It's again not what you say, but the way you say it. So in order to, I guess, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, God does what He does. We want to, every other structure, he'll do that as well. But if you want to be successful, right, you got to do what other people won't do. You got to step out on faith and do that. And I know this is a historical society, right? And that's why I'm going to get into the history of this whole thing. So my grandmother, her name was Gracie Harrison. Now Gracie was married to a Caucasian man in the 1930s. And in the book, I don't have one over here, but if you grab me one, Stephanie, please. On page 6 of this book, I want to show you. It's my mom's mother. And you'll see that she was married to a Caucasian man in the 30s. Now, does she look like she's African American? Well, does he look like he's African American? No. Not at all. He's referred to in Ancestry.com as ruddy. Okay? And they would not, label him as an African American, but he had a ruddy complexion. So it was unfavorable, right, to be married to a black woman. But the thing is, now my sister Verna shared with me that she saw a marriage certificate in the 30s. I never saw it. Rich, you remember seeing one?
No.
Okay. Verna said she saw a marriage certificate. But it was 1958, year after I was born, that the Lovings were married. And this was the first interracial couple. Okay? So I have got Paula in the back who's going to share with you a little bit about the 14th Amendment and what it says. Paula?
All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
And that 14th Amendment was the provision which enabled African Americans to marry Caucasian Americans. Okay? So now it's legal. People don't have to slip in darkness, right? But you see, what happened in this case, my grandmother, his name was Rice Dobbins. I got his middle name, Rice Henry. Yeah, I didn't get Rice. But anyhow, Grace was his sweet, sticky thing. Okay? And my grandmother, she was tough and rough. And you got to read the book. I can't give it all to you, but she was rough. And she would use destructive psychology on us to try to get us to behave. And you have to read that to understand how it works. Okay? Yeah, I'm talking about some of y'all too. All right? She was a tough lady, and she died of insurance. She wouldn't come home. She wouldn't go anywhere. On my grandparents' side, okay, I had, this is my mom's side. Now I'm on my dad's side. Okay? So there was a Sophia Adams. None of these people they took the surname of their slave owners. So Sophia Adams, and she's on page, Steph, I can't remember, it's here, but she's on another page in here. And at age 20, she started breeding because the primary goal was to have folks who would be there to care for the farm. At age 20, Nora Adams, who was my great-grandmother, started to do the same thing. And then Lula Adams, who was my grandmother, married Brother Will, Grandpa Will. It was amazing how at age 20, they all started doing the same thing. Okay? So, there's some political references in here, a couple sentences, but, nothing more. Yes, sir.
I in my research, I think it was Sophia. I think she was a slave.
She was.
That's what she was a slave.
Yes.
And I remember we had the Spence Adams family reunions. We had those for years. And Aunt Adele, which is I guess her sister,
Yes, sir.
talked about when she was a kid, and she remembers Sophie. And I've seen the old black and white. It might be in your book, the old black and white photograph.
Yes, it
That's
is
her.
in here.
And she said she could remember she was a little girl. I guess Sophie was old at that time when she was on. I guess she was sick. But Aunt Adele remembers seeing how they used to brand
Yep.
their
Under their breast.
underbreasts.
They were branded like
And
animals.
she was like 6 years old. She could remember that piece.
Right.
So a lot of what I understand about the family is kind of handed down. So I'm glad you kind of put it together,
Thank you.
in a documentated fashion. But a lot was just handed down.
You
I remember
imagine
that piece.
Brain under your,
Yeah.
and you don't even know who
Yeah. Right.
your lineage.
Right. And even to give the name, I mean, historically, I think when slaves were free, well, they didn't have last names. They were called Joe, Buck, Bill. There wasn't any last names.
Exactly.
So you took the name of a slave person that you worked for. And some
That's-
slaves didn't want to leave at that
That's
time
where
also.
we came from.
Yeah,
though.
right, yeah,
That's where we came from.
yeah.
So Woolwine Will, who Jason's referring to, I couldn't get this. There's a couple discrepancies, whether he was born 4 years after the Civil War or 13 years after the Civil War. On his tombstone, it's 13 years after the Civil War. He couldn't find a job. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do. And he was born down in the Franklin County area. So he had some real talents with corn and fruit and manufacturing spirit. Okay? Man, this guy had a real hard scrabble life. All right? You can only imagine him riding around in this buckboard, okay, with an ox. And Charlie, my first cousin here, gave me that information. I had no idea he was riding. What's wrong with a horse? Couldn't afford a horse. He had to get an ox to pull him around the church. And that was interesting, but I remember the slimy clay because he lived underneath the hill in Woolwine. And if you ever went down there and it was raining, you might you ain't coming out. Right? He couldn't read or write, and it would be 50 years or so before he could vote. But that ox named Bill carried him around.
Bill.
Okay?
Wow.
He was a primitive Baptist preacher, and I showed you a picture of him, and he, as a kid said, he could spit. He could really flow. He had flow with his words. Okay, so Spencer, as you know, is the root word for dispenser, and so either you were a pharmacist, okay, or you worked in a bank and you dispensed money of some sort. Well, he took the former. He developed his talent, all right? He didn't have any experience with banks, money, or even wealth, but he had a lot of experience being poor. And he used that experience to develop what we call a 3S method of cash management. And that's copywritten and it's in the book, and you need to understand that 3S method of how he could secure his money, save his money, and then he did sacrificial giving as well. So it wasn't about him. I'm sorry, Carol. Thank you. So do y'all see a theme developing in this whole presentation so far? Before we go to this next point? It was alcoholism on both sides of my family.
Yeah.
So when you've got an alcohol gene in you, you can run, but you're not gonna hide. Right? And so that's what I had to contend with. Okay, so when you're coming from where we're coming from, this is probably the only political stuff I'm going to talk about. Let's talk about sports just for a minute. When you think of LeBron James, and LeBron started to get political with some of his conversations, what did the media say? Shut up and dribble.
Yeah.
When you think about Aaron Rodgers. When Aaron Rodgers said, I've had the COVID vaccine. What is your perception of that? A lot of folks have a short memory. They don't remember Aaron Rodgers saying, I don't need no COVID vaccine. Why do I need it? You know, just remember what he said. And so when you're coming from where we are, keep in mind that if there's more to the story. Typically there's a backstory. You remember Colin Kaepernick?
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to kneel.
Yep.
A lot of people say, man, oh man.
Mm-hmm.
It's a national anthem. You sitting there trying to kneel over this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Stand up and salute.
Yep.
But the point that I'm making is we all started somewhere, and you know, political statements are just part of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see this, you see how cool this is? This is where we came from. We had some of the best. Y'all know we had some of the best. Some of the best fruits and vegetables. They were organic before organic
Yep.
was a
Organic was organic. My grandfather was a farmer.
Okay. I said I wasn't going to do it, but I gotta do it. Does anybody? I know one person in here who knows kimchi.
Mm-hmm.
You know how kimchi's made? You want to tell them?
Fermenting cabbage and spices together in a jar.
In a jar.
And
I'm sorry?
fish heads.
Fish heads. The other thing about kimchi is it human waste required?
Yes. Korea. Stepped in the honey hole.
So I'm not trying to tell you don't eat kimchi. I'm just letting you know that we were using farm waste on animals, all right, before it was fashionable.
Yeah.
Okay?
Use the stuff off your horses for
That's what we were
fertilizer.
doing. So my dad had a strong work ethic. He had a bunch of jobs, coal miner, and biblically speaking, you know, I represent imperfection because I came along and had to deal with being imperfect. But our lifestyle was pioneer living. Okay, we had outhouses.
Mm-hmm.
We had well water. I mean, not well water. We had to drop that bucket.
Go to spring.
Go to the spring over at Grandpa's and bring that water up the hill. Bring it up the hill and then half a bucket by the time you got up there.
Mm-hmm. Got that right, kid?
Okay? But anyhow, most people who came from Patrick County, they had to put some work in to develop themselves. Right? Because it was kind of understood. There was an unwritten language that if somebody gives you something, they can withdraw that. But if you earn it yourself, it's gonna be difficult. So my point is, hey, listen, use what God gave you. Don't try to imitate anyone else, because typically you won't be as successful. So live with what you've done. Okay? Now, if we start thinking about, and this is important in the book, I kind of designed this thing so that you could see just the hardships and barriers that we had to overcome. There were a lot of people who were extremely poor.
Mm-hmm.
Poor people had a little bit more. And the need mode, there's a section of our county called need mode.
Yep.
Everybody wanted to avoid it. Man, what do you want to go to need mode for? Need mode has, they don't have anything. All right? Need mode had human beings.
Yep.
And our most important thing to do as human beings is touch one another, engage and encourage one another. Okay? There were disadvantaged people, and then there were some folks who were just getting by. Okay? We were somewhere in that need mode disadvantaged section because we needed more privacy, we needed more space. there were a lot of us growing up in a small house. And, you know, we needed more food. We needed more of everything, but the Lord made a way. And so that's what I'm saying to you. You've heard the story about starting and finishing. So I'm not gonna, okay? Now school. This is where, you know, school's a primary socialization agent. You have teachers that teach these kids how to behave and respond and be respectful before you get yourself into real trouble. Well, I got some difficulty in school. And, you know, there were some people in our county who just quit. They wouldn't even go to school any longer. Teachers wasn't teaching, students aren't learning. So in 6th or 5th grade, they just said, I'm just gonna work on the farm. I'll help daddy and mom on the farm.
Was wrong with that out of necessity sometime, also working on the farm? Was
It
out of
really
necessity?
It
You know?
really was.
Yeah, you know, grinding tobacco, stuff like that, you know, farming, it was a necessity. That you
Well,
had to,
you,
'cause
why
of-
don't you, yeah, and I'm not cutting you off.
No. It's my mom's example. I mean, she grew up in Woolwine, and I think where West Liberty Church is, there was a school there back in the day.
That's right.
And that's where mom had to walk from where we lived in Woolwine all the way to that school. And mom was telling the story when she got older. She told the story she wanted to be an educated person. And she liked school. But my grandmother, Novi, said, whoa, wait a minute. I got 13 kids here. Wait a minute. Go to school? Man.
Yeah.
So mom tells her, she pulled mom out of school.
Wasting your time.
Yeah, and mom was there. She was taking care of the younger ones. So mama could go pick apples and do the work.
Right.
So it could bring something to the family. Yeah.
And being an older child,
Yeah.
that was the burden.
Gotcha. Yep.
You had that burden. And,
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people say,
Yeah.
well, it was Jesus bear the cross
Yeah.
alone and all the world
Yeah.
go free and the cross. You
Yeah.
know, you got a burden.
And she would say she wanted to be a teacher. She probably was a good teacher, but at that time in her life, you're talking about 43, maybe 44.
Yeah.
She was 10, 12 years old.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Let's go to work.
Yeah.
Let's go to work.
That's what she did.
So
She did.
Anybody know the tobacco gum on your hands? You know, that nicotine penetrates your skin, and then you got all of that. So a lot of people just working in hay, you know,
Yep.
being a farm hand, and I, you know, I had to see far. I couldn't deal with that. And then I'll never forget Uncle Robert. He had a farm, and Charlie and Louis Thomas told us a lot about how innovative he was.
Mhm.
He probably could have built a dam down there on the river and made his own electricity, but what he was able to do was take whatever, a 41 Ford or something of that model year and convert it into a chainsaw type apparatus in which you could cut logs and boards and you want to tell them about that? No, but he had skills, and this was just, you know, mother wisdom to talk about, but he had skills. So, yeah, we're not minimizing anything, it's just what we had to do.
Yeah.
Now, where I got in difficulty, all right, is dealing with all this. I had a minority mentality. You know, you're going to school with kids who have nice shoes. My shoes were busted. I'm gonna tell you, you know, the tongue was hanging out, the sole was off of them, and I had to sit beside some. They didn't want to sit beside me.
No.
But God gave me a strong mind. And suddenly, oh, wait a minute, I had something else to give, and we'll talk about it. But our jobs, we didn't have jobs where family could bring you in and teach you a skill and give you a set of values. All I knew how to do was, you know, harvest hay and tobacco, recycle pop bottles, be a shoe shine boy, you know, ride a bicycle everywhere I went. I'd ride a bicycle. I'd see my classmates come by in the car and blow it. Can you imagine how that make you feel, Johnny? You know how that make you feel. It's like, you know, take the value right out of your game. I worked at Pepsi Cola as well. But Miss Thompson, Claudette Thompson, anybody know Claudette? Dr. Thompson's daughter. She taught 6th grade. And for one semester, now I can't do anymore. I gotta stop right here. James Hines, William Hines, excuse me. I need you to stand up and share with everybody here the books we had to deal with.
Oh, yeah. That goes back. That's it.
Second grade, we never, ever got new books. We got books that didn't have the table of contents. We got books that had pages torn out, words scratched through, and we're sitting there trying to read this stuff. And it makes no sense. And so I asked William, I said, William, throughout your education, do you ever remember getting a new textbook? He told me he never had one. So you're always dealing with something that has minimal value. And so if they don't value your education, can't get something to read, it's like, you know, where did you say that hay farm is?
They were out of date too, the books we got.
Out of date,
We
really.
were so far behind.
Yes, sir.
When we went to Stewart High,
Right,
when they took you back to Central,
right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
there was a reason for that.
yeah.
They were setting you up to fail. And you're right. There's probably three different generations in here. William and James had a different generation than I was, a generation 20 years. Okay, Frank now, Rich, me and Rich probably the same generation, but you understand that each generation has its own, you know, encumbrances. But Miss Thompson, I'm tired of going to school home. I'm sick and tired of not being able to get lunch. So Miss Thompson taught me in one semester how to manage income and manage money. We would pick individual stocks and work on trading those stocks to make money. 6th grade.
Really?
And, you know, I was always getting pretty good grades, so the other kids were wanting me. My dad told me if I come home with one little D or an F, I'll be going to tear my what up.
And he meant it.
And he meant it. So the point with me was I would say, yeah, I know, I'm reviewing this. I would sell answers, I would cheat. All right, I would charge them 35 cents for 3. And, I mean, I did this, all right? But I had much money. And I could deal with geography. I had some math grades. And suddenly, the people who didn't want to sit beside me found a way to come in and sit beside me. Okay? So I had some lunch money. Now, I'm not proud of this at all. But at 14, I became an addict. Remember, we talked about a theme that was developing. In the big city of Stewart, we had a shot house. Now remember, African Americans had a different lifestyle than Caucasian brothers and sisters. Okay? So you could go to the shot house and get you a shot for 50 cents. And I would go. Okay? Yeah, I was part of that. And I'm embarrassed about it. And my mother found out about it, and was talking to the people who sold me alcohol. Don't you ever sell me anymore again, because if you do, you know, there are going to be some lefts and rights. So I'll talk about the drug was, you know, my mom drugged me a lot of places. She drugged me to school. And then she drugged my butt to court when I got in trouble, got kicked out of school. Okay? So the point I'm making is school got in the way. School was, you know, that was something over there. It's, you know, what other people do. But thank God she drugged me, because she drugged me to church. There was inspiration in the songs we sang. And they lifted me up, and I can still recall them today. The other thing was because of Rich in sports, I learned to play sports and lost an interest in consuming adult beverages. So anyhow, we're at the last section here, and it's not very long. I need to talk to you about not stealing from yourself. And you're saying, what the heck? What do people do? How do they steal from themselves? Well, you miss opportunities. You don't take advantage of what's around you. How in the world are you going to know what somebody's thinking unless they tell you? So you got to engage and interact with people so that you don't steal from yourself and miss that opportunity for self-development. So we're going to get into a little bit of this if I can find my notes. But I'm going to talk to you about the greatest generations. World War I, World War II. They said World War II veterans are the greatest generation that ever lived. Because see, they were fighting the Germans and the Japanese. It was two wars going on at the same time. When I was in Pearl Harbor, I was able to find my uncle's memorial when he was there. So I didn't cheat myself. I took the effort to find it. Okay? Now, how many of y'all know where the D-Day Memorial is?
Bedford.
Where's it at?
Bedford.
It's in Bedford. So how many of you have taken the advantage, to go 50 miles to the D-Day Memorial? I love it. To deny yourselves that day trip, you're cheating yourself. You want to see what the price that these young people had to pay. Somebody had to pay a price for our freedom. Who knows where the Booker T. Washington home place is? Where is it?
Franklin County.
Burton. That's exactly where it is. Burton, Virginia, down in Franklin County. And so the thing is, if you haven't started to experience that, you don't even know what's around you. You can't talk fluently and have an intelligent conversation until you get out there and find it. In the book, how many people have been to the Vietnam Memorial? Who from Patrick County is on that memorial, Jason?
I have an uncle, Israel Alonzo Ingram. March 4th, 1968.
That's when it's hot and heavy.
Tet Offensive. He was in that Tet Offensive battle. I think they lost 10,000 men in that battle.
And Bobby Cohen's. So what I'm saying to you guys, take the opportunity to find out their investment in Patrick County. They made a difference. What about the Martin Luther King Memorial? Atlanta?
DC.
Where's it?
It's DC.
It's DC.
It is in DC. Well, they've got one there.
Yeah,
You're right.
That's historic. That's an historic society.
That exactly.
Historic.
Exactly right.
Perspective. Yeah. He was a minister. He was
Right
a minister.
outside the church, they've got a whole walkway that explains all of his accomplishments. So it is in Atlanta, but the main one is in Washington, D.C. And if you go to that memorial, okay, it takes some time, and parking is, it's a challenge. And you're talking about the wall, you're right. But if you can find a parking space, you want to make sure you try to do that. I'm just about at my time, because I did say I'd hold for 45 minutes. The Pearl Harbor Memorial is out in Hawaii, okay? I guess who wants to walk around with regrets and be miserable their whole life?
Got a few.
Oh man, that's a mess, isn't it? No, we're not gonna walk around with regrets. We're gonna walk around with our head held high and say, hey, listen, I've bothered, all right, to try to develop myself. Now, it's not to take credit for something that didn't occur, but I think it was every one of the Ingram boys out of Woolwine, Aunt Nova's children, who actively volunteered to serve in the armed forces. Every one. Okay? And Rich and Joe, okay, John and myself served in the armed forces. So this was the investment that we made. The boys were always kind of targeted. And Charlie and Billy, Were y'all in Vietnam at the same
I
time?
was over in Vietnam, go to 68, 69.
Whoa, 68, 69, that's hot.
Mm-hmm.
Hot there.
Billy, he didn't have to go because he couldn't send two brothers over there, so he volunteered to go. He
really?
went to Germany.
He went to Germany.
Wow.
Where he bore his cross.
There's only really one real branch of the service, and that's the Marine Corps.
And what did they say? In agreement?
Well said.
The Marines believe that. The Marines believe that.
Always a Marine, man.
Yeah,
Always
yeah.
a Marine.
These wars were about freedom, it wasn't about tyranny. Okay? So, I guess what I'm saying, James, and you're James, either way, don't lose yourself trying to improve yourself. Don't mimic other people, right? Take what God gave you and move with it. So whatever happens to you, typically it's what you did to yourself, what somebody else did to you, right? Or what the devil wants you to do. And we're going to take that third option out of the equation. And we're not going to let anybody just take advantage of us either. We're going to make a difference on our own. Okay? Let's see. I'm almost there. Now I want to tell you a little bit about, before I go, this is who I was hanging out with. I talked to you a little bit about having an alter ego or a counter ego, somebody that can bounce things off of you, and the 3S money management. On page 263 is where Frederick Douglass is, and we talked about Frederick Douglass and why he's my favorite all time. He's my favorite all time. But you're going to see on some of the boards that I've served on, appointed by the governor to serve on boards of the Commonwealth. And what I mean by that is when you go to, if you're a practitioner and you have a license, usually practitioners don't go before a judge. They come before their standards of practice boards. And I've served on 3 of those boards. So if they do something wrong, I won't give you all the details because I can't. But I've served on 3 of those boards, and we had someone who was abusing children. Okay? They didn't go before court of law. They came before our board, and we would give them serious consequences, fines, and disbar them. So the point that I'm making, it took a lot of work to get to that point to be on one of those boards. Okay? Now, here you go. This is where you're almost done, I promise. Now, if you had Frankenstein right in here in front of you, and you had to make Frankenstein a leader, what would he look like? And I appreciate answers. Just tell me. 2 more slides and I'm done.
He'd have a smile.
He'd have a smile. What else? Would he be smart? Now, we're not caring about how he looks. Just talk to me about his characteristics. Would he be smart?
Be outgoing.
Huh?
Outgoing.
Outgoing? He'd be smart. Would he have a high IQ or a high EQ? Emotional quotient.
EQ.
Okay? Both? I think you're right. He'd have to be smart, but he'd have to be relatable. Okay? Would he be like Jesus?
Nope.
He wouldn't be like Jesus.
You can't go on be like him.
Okay? Amen. Stamina. Would he admit what he doesn't know?
Yes.
You don't want to be sitting there listening to somebody who don't know what you're talking about. They're fake, they're fraud, you figured out right quick. All right. So the last slide that I got here, this is not rocket science, not anything we talked about. I know it's a historical society, and the section is about the future. So let me go back. future's in the hands of the present. People around us right today, you're the future. Yeah, you are. You really are. Now, does anybody know the difference between a digital immigrant and a native immigrant? This is what kids are talking. This is the language they're using. You and I are digital ignorant. We're digitally ignorant. We're ignorant and we're immigrants, whereas the kids grew up with computers in their hands. So they're native. They can talk the talk, and some of us are still having difficulty dealing with a smartphone. Right? So the point that I'm making is you've got to keep up. It's your responsibility to start to keep up and figure out, hey, what do I need to do to learn more? Okay? Now, you've heard the term, and I'm almost done, I promise. I'll let you out here. If you want to buy the book, there's some for sale. Have you heard about fake news? That's fake news. What the heck is that? Right? So the way fake news develops, people come in, and you'll see, well, let's start at the beginning. How did you get your news when you were growing up? Enterprise? So you got it from a newsprint. Okay. TV?
Walter Cronkite.
Radio? You don't nobody get news like that anymore. And see, what we have that we're not using is we got Google. We can go in there and say, Google, yada, yada, yada.
That's it.
But what happens with this fake news business, and I'm sure you've heard this, fake news is when people will start out and say, I'll give you a bad example. It's really a heat wave, right? And the heat is so hot that it will melt plastic and it just, my dashboard warped in my car. And you sit there and say, yeah, that's right. It is that hot. But the very next paragraph comes in and says, well, it wouldn't have been that hot if the natives in China weren't burning all those hydrogen fuels. That's why China's our enemy. And look at what happened over in Africa. They're drinking and using a bottle of water. And so you're sitting there saying, oh, this started out good. It was a good first paragraph, but now look what has happened. And suddenly you're off goes the fake news. When all you had to do was Google whether folks in Africa are calling, okay, global warming. But all I'm saying to you is don't lose yourself to improve yourself. Keep up, because it ain't changing. Are there any questions? The two most important words were what?
Thank you.
All right, so I got one more thing to give away. I got one more. All right, so can anybody tell me, let me make it a challenge here. I gotta make it a challenge. Is it important to navigate conflict?
Yes.
Absolutely. Don't be walking around angry with somebody all the time. Learn how to navigate conflict and deal with confusion. You're gonna be better off for it. And so, Ms. Esther, is it important, okay, to incorporate AI into our vernacular? Is it important to incorporate AI into our vernacular? No. I said no. It ain't going away, guys.
Mm-mm.
You're gonna have to keep up. You're gonna have to deal with it.
So,
All right. Thank you for your time, especially your attention, and and Mr. John Reynolds will shut us down.
I'm sure he'll be hanging around and can answer some questions for you later, but we wanted to, first thank him for coming all the way from Richmond down here, to come down and speak to us, and he donated a copy of the book, and, it's a really fascinating book. With your black and white, there's people in there you know, and people some of the life experiences you identify with for sure. Just great. But we wanted to present him with he knows a lot of history already. We'll present him with a copy of the Historical Society's history of Patrick County. There's gaps in there, especially time before slavery and all that. It's more of a 20th century type thing that we have records of. There's information about the black schools and such, and we're still uncovering things. More recently, the most recent thing that I didn't know about was the Indian Knob School down Route 8 over at Five Forks, and I just heard about one over at Crossroads where Squirrel Spur comes into Clark School. And somebody called it the Crossroads Colored School, something like that. We don't have much information about these things. History is an ongoing thing. We're uncovering things as we go along. I learned a whole lot from this book and continue to learn more. If you give us a few minutes, we'll have a little reception. Now you've got some punch and some cookies and stuff. So, but you want to take some questions now?
I'll be happy to do that and let you know that. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. When you are publishing a book like I did, I'll give anybody who gets closest, I'll give take the top 3 answers.